Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello everyone, welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man, and I'm going to call and add Foster Gamble here in just a minute, and we're going to be discussing the Thrive movement, which him and some of his partners have put together. And I saw their video over at YouTube. And really, I think this is some worthwhile information I think you folks are going to enjoy. And I think we had a little mix-up as to whether I was calling him or him calling me. So let me try to get him on the phone real quick. Before I do that real quick, I want to mention to everybody that his website, I got that here, is www.thrivemovement.com. And also, don't forget, if you're listening in at Shoutcast or at say, iTunes or somewhere else, the call-in number is 832-632-7904. Now, I'm going to go ahead and call him and try to raise him up on the phone real quick.
Hello?
Hello, Foster?
Yes.
Hi, this is Royce at Paranormal Palace Radio. I've already did your introduction and we're already live on the air. I wasn't sure if you was going to call me or if I was going to call you, so I went ahead and waited up till the last minute to call you. I hope that's okay with you.
That's just fine. I'm ready to go. Thanks for having me.
I want to thank you for coming on the air. I had actually got an email from one of the groups I was in that was telling me about the Thrive movement and with a link added to YouTube, and that's how I found out about you. And I was like, well, you know what? This sounds like some very interesting information, and I thought my listeners would like to have a chance to know a little something about it. That's why I contacted Leo.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
At any rate, I was going to also mention to you that when I watched the video, that tourist that you mentioned, and you can go into a detail about that in a minute about what this is. Before I forget it, I forgot to mention it, though. I wanted to say, you know that reminded me for all in the world of a wormhole?
Yes, indeed. I think that if there are wormholes, they would be toroidal vortices. So
they not necessarily be something dangerous like black holes. It could be wormholes rather than black holes, and may not be as dangerous to go into as, say, scientists might think they are. It could be a mistake.
Well, I think that every living organism in the universe is a toroidal field. So it just all depends on the size and relative gravitational field, whether or not they're dangerous to us.
Oh, okay.
There's more and more thinking at the leading edge of physics right now that is proposing that there's a black hole at the center of every system, not only every galaxy and every galactic cluster, but every sun and every atom and every electron. So we may actually be made up of black holes. It's just that they're so small that the gravitational fields balance out so that it's not a danger to us. In fact, we're made of them.
Okay, now that sounds a lot like, and you probably got his name pronounced correctly, and I hope you can correct me on it, but it's Nassim Haramein. I seen a video on him doing this similar kind of work about singularities, which I think is probably linked to your work too somehow, isn't it?
Sure. Well, Nassim and I are good friends and actually worked together for 6 years. We had independently come to a lot of the same conclusions, and then when we met, we decided to work together for a while, and I've learned an awful lot from him. I think he's one of the most advanced scientists that I've ever met. Even though he wasn't traditionally trained, he was able to really follow the meaningful questions and come up with an understanding of the cosmology, really how the universe works, that is in many ways beyond anyone that I've seen.
Oh, I would tend to agree with you. I saw his video over at Google, and I was extremely impressed. And to be honest with you, I tried to contact him to get him on my show, but I think the email address I used might have been old. So maybe you can send a message to them after the show that I'd like to have them.
Okay.
But at any rate, getting back to this here from your end of this here work, you didn't just talk about this Taurus alone, but before we go into some of the other stuff, why don't you explain a little bit about this Taurus to the listeners?
Well, it's a very interesting notion. It's a little bit like if some fish were swimming around in the water and they said, "Hey, did you hear some fish made a movie about something called water? Sounds a little strange. I don't know what it is, but it might be worth looking into." As I mentioned before, we're really embedded in a limitless sea of toroidal fields, and yet most people don't even know the word because it's primarily a mathematical term. But we've all seen an apple and an orange, and we've seen depictions of the electromagnetic field around the body and around the Earth and around the sun and around the galaxy. And it turns out that there is only one pattern that sustains itself in a homogeneous or continuous medium. In other words, one pattern that can continue when it's made out of the very substance that it's in. So in other words, you can have a whirlpool in water, and it's just water, but we can still distinguish it as a whirlpool amidst the rest of the water. And the reason that it can sustain itself is because it can flow inside out, and it can flow around its central axis at the same time, and that's what creates this sustainable vortex. So the magic of it is for human beings that the universe is showing us at every level what the blueprint would be for a sustainable system. So if we can now wake up to realize that and really study the torus vortex, and then model our systems after it, from our energy access systems to our economic systems, our media systems, our interpersonal communication systems, if we can model the principles that nature is embodying in the torus, we can actually create sustainable systems and have a civilization which can actually thrive on a healthy planet. So it's of huge importance and possibility right now.
Yeah, because you could have clean air energy. It wouldn't be no more of this. They're dinosaur fossil fuel, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. When we're having to dig into the earth and get a limited supply of fossil fuels and then explode it in order to access the energy, that's obviously a limited paradigm in terms of accessing the resource, but also it's a very dangerous one in terms of polluting the skies, of fighting over a limited supply, and especially now that we've taken it to the level of nuclear, of potentially destroying life as we know it on planet Earth. So that's been kind of the long-term male macho approach to how we're going to get energy out of a system. It turns out if you learn to dance with energy, a more feminine approach, a more humble approach to realize our oneness with life in the universe, and then you realize this fundamental patterning and mimic it. If you create a technology which mimics the geometry and uses appropriate materials, and then ends up rotating an electromagnetic field in the proper way at certain frequencies, it will basically play music with its environment. It'll go into harmonic resonance with its ambient energy, and if we know how to build the device, it will start pouring out unlimited, clean, safe energy. And that's a lot of what we go into in the film, is that those technologies already exist on planet Earth, and it's one of the most exciting things that I've ever come across, and that's the good news. The bad news is that the powers that be have been suppressing that technology ever since Nikola Tesla at the beginning of the 20th century, because they've got their own vested interests in selling the oil, coal, and natural gas that they own, and also using a limited energy supply to control other people's lives.
Yeah, that's very true. And I was just fixing to say, yes, we have this technology, but it's not exactly public knowledge or common market. It's not like you can go buy it at the corner store, so to speak, because there are people that don't want this out. And, I've done some study in this, and I believe what I read was Nikola Tesla's papers and his diary and stuff come up missing after his death, and that his death was under suspicious circumstances. Is that correct?
That's my understanding as well. His laboratories and his home were raided immediately, and by the government, and all of his papers and equipment was taken, as far as I can tell in my research.
Yeah, and that wouldn't surprise me a bit in the world, especially since we know that back in his day, J.P. Morgan, I believe it was funding a lot of his work, and it was a threat to J.P. Morgan, because he wanted the copper wire electricity out there, not the wireless energy that you couldn't put a meter on.
Exactly. It's a good reminder to be very careful of who you take money from.
Yeah, really. And, if you look at J.P. Morgan now, he's one of the biggest banking tycoons out there. So,
yeah.
I think that says a whole lot about it. But, how did he get his money is another story. And is it something he can be proud of, in other words?
Right. And what did he do with it?
Well, I think everybody pretty well has an idea what he's been doing with his money, and it's not exactly what we would want.
Yeah. But
now I was also thinking about the fact when I was listening to you a minute ago that I've read some work from Richard Hoagland. I like to keep tracks on him quite a bit, and he does that work in hyperdimensional physics, and he had noticed a little like hexagram in the top of the thing at one of those planets. I think it was Jupiter, and another one in the bottom, like in the atmosphere, not in the actual planet itself, that would kind of, be like an opening at the top and opening at the bottom to make the planet almost look like it was itself acting as this torus that you describe.
Yes, exactly. I've seen that work, and I think it's one of the grandest scale proofs that we have of how nature uses this toroidal vortex to create matter. We tend to think of that we have a body and maybe the body has a field, but I think more accurately, consciousness creates a field, and then the field assembles the atoms to create and molecules to create a body. And it's the same way with the planet. I think that the toroidal energy field is there that creates a solar system and also that creates each one of the planets.
And this does also, like I said, going back to that, what was mentioned earlier about singularity, and it also matches a pattern that somebody else discovered. I forget who it was. You probably seen it, but he was talking about this same kind of circular pattern that you could see it in tree leaves. You could see it in the blade of grass if you're looking at it, like say through a microscope, or almost anything you looked at. There would always be a circular type of pattern that would look kind of like a vortex, in other words.
Mm-hmm. Well, you may be referring to the phi spiral. There's a certain spiral that we see everywhere in nature. We see it in pine cones and dandelions, and the pattern that branches on a plant or a tree make in order to optimize their exposure to the light. But this particular pattern, the power of the pattern is that it's the one spiral that allows a system to maintain its proportion while it's growing larger. Because imagine if our arms and legs just all of a sudden were growing at different rates. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's a very powerful pattern in nature that enables us to exist. And there's a colleague of mine named Marshall Lefferts, Lefferts, who's done some, I think, really important work recently on reconciling the torus vortex with the phi spiral, and what he calls the double phi spiral when it's going both directions. And people can check that out if they're interested at cosmometry.com on the internet.
And that was exactly the thing I was talking about. I couldn't think of the name of it, but when you mentioned the name, it came back to my memory. But yeah, I wanted to bring that up because what I'm noticing here is this here pattern. It's not just being discovered by you. It's being discovered by Nissim. It's being discovered by Richard Hoagland, the guy with the 5 spiral. I mean, there's all kinds of sources that's finding the same basic pattern and different things and through different methods, in other words. So, it's very pronounced.
Yeah, in fact, we're not anywhere close to the first people to come across it. When I discovered the power of it, when I realized what the implications of it, I thought, we can't be the first people to know about this. And fortunately, Nassim had done a lot of research, and also another colleague named Stan Tenen at the Meru Project have done a lot of research into ancient cultures and found where this awareness of the toroidal pattern and of the kind of structural geometry that goes with it, what Buckminster Fuller called the vector equilibrium, which is fundamentally the kind of mother geometry of space-time itself. These two patterns were very specifically encoded in the ancient Kabbalah, in the Hebrew tradition. It's encoded in the I Ching. It's encoded in the Egyptian and the Mayan tradition and the Sumerian and on and on. And so, my next question then was, how would they have known about that thousands of years ago, what we're just discovering now as so important to the leading edge of science and geometry, physics, and energy? And we can't know for sure, I don't think, but one possible explanation is that people who were deeply intuitive and who could go to particular states of consciousness where they could access so-called cosmic consciousness or the Akashic records where knowledge can be accessed in just the field of consciousness, people might have accessed it that way who are very adept. And as well, possibly even, strangely enough, a more rational explanation might be that this planet was visited throughout history by advanced civilizations. The extraterrestrials, either from other planets, other solar systems, other galaxies, or merely other vibrational planes of existence, and that they came into form in our reality and then taught people in the ancient cultures about some of this knowledge and about the technologies that were available through learning to develop these technologies. And it turns out, as Nassim has described, that many of these ancient cultures have stories, icons, buildings, drawings, and so forth, depicting the so-called sun gods who would come out of the sky in these burning chariots and then actually teach them about the leading-edge math and physics. And to this day, we don't know how the Great Pyramid was built. There are blocks of stone in Egypt that have been cut with laser-like precision and then moved distances that are absolutely inexplicable by today's technology. Just vast blocks that we couldn't even lift today, much less move and put accurately in place. So the notion that they had other technologies and anti-gravitational capabilities actually makes more and more sense the more you look into it.
Now, I've been to your website as well as listening to the movie, and I noticed that you, like I said earlier, you cover some other things on this there website, and it's very in-depth. You talk in a couple of places about the problem. You talk about the code. You talk about the code in ancient cultures and new energy. And what I haven't read up that you put on here yet was about ET UFO, which I am going to get around to. I kind of got to do my reading around my show and my posting, I understand. Right. But at any rate, real quick, can you tell us what the connection is to ET and UFO?
Yeah. For those people who've seen the movie Contact, which happens to be one of my favorites, when that movie came out, I had a dozen calls from all over the country of friends and family contacting me to say, they're making a movie that is so similar to your lifetime research, you got to see this thing. And I saw it and I thought they just did an absolutely fantastic job. But if people remember, there was a code that the movie was based around, that we got this signal from off the planet, and when they finally decoded the signal, it was a three-dimensional geometry revealing how to make the device that could then travel through space and time, through the wormhole, like you talked about earlier. Well, this is exactly what my research has led to, and it's just chilling when I stop and think that it's not some fictional movie, that I believe this is real, that these codes have been sent across time, and they're appearing through some sort of advanced technology in crop circles throughout the world, these same understandings of how energy works are being taught to us throughout history and now from what seems like advanced cultures. And the geometries match exactly both the geometries that I've studied all my life about how nature creates matter and how it focuses energy, but also I've interviewed a number of very credible people, all independent of each other. They didn't know one another, who claim quite credibly to have been invited onto alien ships, and sometimes numerous times, and several of them were actually shown what drives the ship. And each of them independently reported to me with pictures and descriptions, some of which we have in the film and on the website. They described to me in great detail what drove the ship, and in every single case, it was a sort of a rainbow toroidal vortex, actually a double torus. And it makes total sense to me, correlating with the physics that I've studied, that it would need to be a toroidal vortex in order to create its own mini black hole and therefore create its own gravitational field, which could then insulate the ship. And this is what they describe. It insulates the ship out of the beyond the influence of Earth's or any other planet's gravity, and then they can tune the pressure differential of the north and south pole of that field such that they can aim it and then travel through space and time as we know it in such a way that they can go thousands of miles an hour faster than anything that we've developed. They can turn at a right angle at full speed or even acute angles without obviously smashing their bodies up against the edge of whatever their ship's made of. And if they're here from other solar systems, much less other galaxies, then obviously they're not taking, a million generations and burning fossil fuel to get here. So they must have something that not only accesses energy wherever it is in space, but also alters space-time itself in such a way that they can travel what we would consider huge distances in normal physical space-time, and yet not be aging in the normal way that we would expect. So then the punchline of all that, to answer your question, is how does UFOs relate to free energy? If they're here, and the evidence is overwhelming, thousands and thousands of sightings and hundreds of hours of credible footage, and over 500 personal disclosures by high-level military and government people that we go into a little bit in the film and the website, of people coming forward and sharing their first-hand experience of these things. The evidence is just overwhelming that they're here, and they have been for some time. And if they're here, then obviously they're using a technology that is way beyond how we access energy. And I think it's one of the reasons for the government suppression of the UFO phenomenon is they don't want people clamoring to find out, well, what is that energy source and how can we access it? Because my research leads me to believe that the government already has very advanced devices along the lines of what I'm talking about. They've basically confiscated over 5,000 patents of people looking to apply to get a patent to develop this type of energy source. So what I think is happening is the powers that be are wanting to keep this energy source for themselves, to create their own flight vehicles and to create their own energy access, but in a way that doesn't come out to Main Street, such that they can still continue to control people's lives until they've completed their agenda for global domination that I talk about in the movie.
And this global domination has been a thing, I think, since the very beginning of time, or ever since we've been around, to be, you might say. It's listed from the word go in the Bible almost to the very end.
Well, I think that there is a part of every human being which, when distorted by early childhood experience or indoctrination or something, some sort of abuse or trauma, can go into a mode of behavior that is very fear-based, very ritual-based, and is dependent on controlling other people in order to gain some sense of security in itself. And I think that's been throughout history. But it's gotten very organized over the last several hundred years. And now with the technologies that are available, this kind of crazy dream of dominating the lives of everybody on the planet seems to have become what they think is a realistic goal. And I describe in the film how I realized one day I got myself to think from their point of view. I mean, most of us don't get up in the morning and think, let's see, how can I dominate everybody else's life? But there are people who do, and we need to understand that in order to create an effective response. And so I went through the exercise in the middle of the night one night thinking, okay, if there are people who want to dominate everyone else, what would they have to do to accomplish it? So I started making a list. And, first and foremost, they'd have to control money. Because if they can control money, then they can pay people to do their bidding, at least for a while. And if they can control money, then the next thing they would want to do is control energy. Because you can control people's lives if you can divvy out the energy and pull it away from them if they don't cooperate. And then they would need to control food, and they would need to keep people in debt, and they would need to keep people sick, and they would need to control the media and schools in order that they would keep people from thinking critically about the authority that was being imposed and really going after the questions of what's really going on here and why aren't we free and why aren't we prosperous. And they're actually, according to my research, I was very horrified to find out that they're a long ways along in their plan. They're actually very close from their point of view to completing that. And I have read that their goal is to complete it by the end of 2012 because amongst other reasons, the charter of the Federal Reserve expires in 2013. And it's now getting very exposed, and people are beginning to call for its collapse. And I believe the powers that be want to get this agenda fully in place by the end of next year. So we're really hoping that Thrive and many other good media artifacts can be helpful in waking people up and helping to organize around the principles of integrity and liberty rather than around fear and domination.
Now that was very, very, very interesting, especially that part, actually more than one part, but the one thing I want to target right now is what you said about the Federal Reserve. That was news to me, and it's very critical information, like you said, because that's where we're getting our currency from right now. And if they had planned from its very founding to only use it to 2013, then that says a whole lot about the fact that they had a plan, hundreds of years ago, if not more. They had the dates for the plan. They had how they was going to go about the plan, the whole entire 9 yards. And they were so confident about it that they knew when they was going to end one money system and start a new money system.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve was brought in 1913. It was a secret plan created by the primary bankers at the time, including J.P. Morgan, as well as the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and Carnegies and a few others. And the purchasing power of what was $1 in 1913 is now less than 4 cents. So if you look at the graph, it will basically go to zero probably next year. And, was that just horrible planning and incompetence? A lot of people think so, but the more you look into it, the more you see that the collapse of in 1929 was orchestrated by these same bankers, and they sold most of their stocks right before the collapse and then bought up huge amounts of stock in various companies for pennies on the dollar as they brought the market back, and then basically did the same thing again in 2008. And it seems like it's not just a national plan this time, but a global plan, and you can see it acting out, every day now in the headlines across the world that they're basically collapsing the economies of all the major countries across the world. And once again, I absolutely don't believe it's incompetence or ignorance, but that it's in fact a conscious plan to put the world into distress, so that we all would be clamoring for some sort of authority to rescue us from the chaos, and that they've already got all the plans laid out for a global government based on a single global cashless currency, a single army, and that plan, which people would not go for right now, giving up not only the sovereignty of their countries, but the sovereignty of themselves, and now paying international taxes to the IMF and the World Bank to dominate the rest of us. People wouldn't go for that,
right?
Except in the case of a lot of confusion and a lot of distress. And I unfortunately, I think that the plan is to bring down that sort of economic chaos within the next year, possibly even within the next several months.
Yeah, kind of like turn everybody in the world into willing slaves without their knowing that they become willing slaves.
Exactly.
Which is a pretty insidious plan, if you ask me.
It is, and it's hard to face. You know, it's hard to grok that other human beings would actually do that. But unless we realize it, then we'll be ineffective at not only keeping it from happening, but if it does start to happen, we need to already have plans in place for an alternative way of relating to each other and to our planet that is based on justice and liberty as opposed to fear and control.
Well, you also mentioned some solutions on your website, and I want to get into that before we run out of time. However, I've got about 3 or 4 questions that Jennifer asked in the chat room that I wanted to go ahead and lay on the board real quick before we go into that. And also real quick, because I did this when I did the introduction before I called you, but I want to put it in there again for people that weren't listening. And that is that your website is www.thrivemovement.com, and you can get his videos and then one of them's in HD and one of them's just regular format, if I understand this correctly, at Amazon. I've got links to them right here on this page, and I'll be moving the links to my archives tomorrow, but they'll still be in the archives where you can get to them there. And
you can either watch the movie online for $5 at thrivemovement.com, or you can buy the videos at our website through Amazon.
Okay, now, yeah, and I'm glad you did mention that, because I had forgotten to mention the part about the getting it on the website, which was, again, www.thrivemovement.com, and he's got a lot of information over there, too, folks, by the way. And for people that are listening at other locations, like, say, maybe Shoutcast or iTunes, if you want to call in, the number is 832-632-7904. And I'm going to go ahead and start asking some of these questions that I had them just a moment ago. Here we go. That Jennifer was asking. He wants to know, what do you think about the hollow holes in each planet and the satellites such as Mars?
I'm not sure what she means by the hollow holes.
You know, she's one of the regulars to my show, and I think she's interested in hollow earth theory. She'd have to type in the chat room, but maybe it's kind of connected to that.
Well, I can say a couple of related things that she may be talking about. You know, when you see the sunspots on the sun, they are toroidal vortices, just as the big storm is on Jupiter. They're all toroidal vortices, just like a hurricane or a tornado. And the sunspots usually come in pairs because they are actually vorticular tubes that go in toward the center of the sun, which I do believe is hollow and centered by a black hole. And Nassim has laid out that work a lot. And usually you will find another sunspot on exactly the opposite place on the surface of, or the corona of the sun, because it's really a vortex going all the way through the center. And I think that most planets and suns are hollow, in a sense, in the same way that a black hole is, that there's a singularity at the center, and then there's an area of hollowness or plasma, or there's different pressures, and then there's some sort of crust or corona, depending on the temperature outside of that.
Okay. Well, we had a caller a minute ago, and I tried to pick up the line, but I didn't make it in time. So let me mention to everybody, if you're calling in, sometimes the answering service will pick up before I'm able to get to it, and just make sure you try back, and I'll do my best to get to you. Then what you said made a lot of sense. And she was also saying, would you see the spirals rotating the planet and the satellites from one whole true north and true south? I think what she's asking you is, in each case, whether it be a planet or a satellite, would you expect the holes of the torus to be at the very top and the very bottom, if I understand that correctly?
I would. You know, there's usually a little bit of difference, just like on this planet, between true north and magnetic north, and you get a little, it's a kind of a complicated, what they call precession, where there's a slight wobble around the spin axis. But nevertheless, fundamentally, they're, the vortex of the torus field itself, yes, will tend to be at the North Pole and South Pole.
Okay. Now, let's see where we're at with this one here. He wants to know, have you heard of, oh wait, I think we got that caller coming back. Let me try to get that real quick. Caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, caller, if you're listening to me in the background, it's bleeding through. You might want to mute your speakers until you get off the phone. Okay. Anyway, go ahead.
All right. Hello?
We're still
I'm online?
Yes, you are.
Okay. It was to ask questions, basically. It's Jennifer.
Okay. Well, Jennifer, you can go ahead and ask the questions I was asking for you, since it's you that's calling.
Okay. Am I online right now?
Yes, you are.
Jennifer, I'm here, Foster's here, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions.
Hi. Okay. Concerning the spirals, would you call that such as a communication energy? Like it's an energy that communicates with everybody, and could that be one with everyone? I don't know if it's making sense.
I think that's a fabulous and very, very interesting question. I would say yes. The simple answer to your question is that yes, I think we all communicate through toroidal vortices, and that every cell in our body is communicating with one another through the field. What Bucky Fuller called the isotropic vector matrix field is made up of all these toroidal vortices in shifting patterns. But where every center, the singularity at the center of every toroidal field, whether it's an electron or a galaxy, I think the singularities at the center are all connected with each other at the level of consciousness. That consciousness is primary to what we call the material world, and the material world is just how consciousness spins these vortices into enough stability that we call them atoms and molecules and bodies and planets and things like that. But I think oftentimes the traditional physics ignores the point that at the center of every one of those systems is absolute stillness, and traditional physics doesn't include consciousness. So it's missing the core background energy and intelligence that, yes, I think we're all part of one continuous field of energy, and that is all interconnected, and at the center we are one. And then we have to filter out most of the communications that are going on, just like most of the TV stations. You want to watch one at a time so it can make sense. But they're all these vibrational planes are passing through us at the same time, and it's a matter of selecting the ones that are most useful for whatever kind of communication we're wanting to do with one another.
And would you consider that like thought?
Yes, I think that a thought is a pattern in the field, an energetic pattern created by consciousness itself. And we can see, I used to be involved for many years. I had a company that developed brainwave biofeedback technology, and then we had a training center in Silicon Valley. So we got to actually measure and feed back to people a lot on what the electrical activity looked like across their brain as they were having different types of thoughts and feelings and so forth. But it was important for people to recognize that the brain is the antenna. It's the transceiver and the transmitter. But it works for the mind, which is non-physical and linked to this infinite consciousness.
And would your research be based on the project Pandora from the Russians?
I'm not familiar
Pandora.
with that. I'm
No,
not familiar with that.
It's a microwave activity. It was an attack based from the Russians on Moscow, the U.S. embassy in Russia.
Oh yes, I do remember that. I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know the name of it, but yes, I'm familiar with that phenomenon. That was kind of the first time that microwave weapons as a weapon affecting people's consciousness appeared, and unfortunately, I believe that's being used all over the planet now by
the
various
MDIT.
And unfortunately, I've had a couple of friends who are either inventors or researchers who have been attacked with that very technology, and it's important that people know about it. It's very dangerous stuff.
Yeah, and that is made also by the military, the MDIT or TI. That is made by the military too. No, that is it's called an ME weapon, and it targets humans. And what it does is that it tries to eliminate as much people as it can, so the New World Order could take over. Basically, that's the theory behind it.
Yes, unfortunately, I think that's one of the purposes for the HARP antenna, as well as some of the scalar wave satellites, these directed energy weapons that we have a little story about in the film Thrive. Okay. Jennifer, have you seen the movie Thrive yet?
No, I have not, sir.
I highly recommend that you take a look at it. It goes into a number of the things that you seem to have been researching yourself.
Okay, that's perfect. I will. Thank you.
Good.
And but your studies, I just want to make sure your studies hasn't been conducting with microwaves and all these, right? I just want to make sure.
No, the company that I ran only did brainwave biofeedback, where we just monitor the brainwaves. We don't alter them artificially at all. We just we pick up the brainwaves and turn it into music, so people can hear what's going on in the frequencies of their brain and learn to control them, both to let go in their mind and to focus their mind more voluntarily and creatively.
Okay. I want also to ask you, I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm taking up your time, sir, but I want to ask you, I'm from Canada, okay? And in Canada, these researchers, these doctors, have come up with this very interesting project that, people that are in a coma.
Yes.
And they put on this cast to pick up brainwaves, and they actually can determine what the person is thinking while they're in a coma. So when you ask them, "Are you thirsty?" they actually respond a yes or a no, and they actually could see the brainwaves responding to their questions. What is your? Have you heard of that, or is that? Well, it is fairly recent, so.
I've heard that people were attempting to do that. That's more success than I've heard of people having, but there is more and more advanced technology coming out now that is enabling that, particularly with what they call MEG or magnetoencephalograph. Is that what you were talking about before? I'm not sure, but the usual brainwave biofeedback just has electrodes on the scalp, so it's a little bit like trying to tune a car by putting a stethoscope on the hood of the car. You're only getting what's coming up to the surface. With magnetoencephalography, it's tremendously expensive, so that's why it's not available to hardly anyone at this point. But with magnetoencephalography, you can actually pick up the brainwaves from different parts inside the brain. So that's probably what they're doing, and it's probably very much more accurate. But when we were training people at our center, we did studies with Zen masters and yogis and Qigong masters and also a number of psychics. And we had psychics come in who could tune their brain the way you or I would tune our radio or TV, where literally they could in an instant go into specific brainwave states, and they would describe, okay, this is where I do remote medical diagnosis. This is where I do psychic healing. This is where I do telepathy. So they were a glimpse for me of the possibilities that all of us will be able to access in the future. It's really exciting.
It is. And like I was saying in the chat room, you are very, very interesting.
Thank you.
And I wanted to know, did you ever hear of Jim Sparks?
Jim Sparks?
Yeah. He claims that he's been abducted for many, many years, and he has driven spacecraft with military men from the USA, and for the purpose of when we do need to get out of here, that he could drive. But there are many, like you said, many people that are being trained to actually drive these crafts. So I don't know.
So we have chauffeurs if they'll let us in the limo. I don't know of Jim Sparks, but I will look him up. It's a very interesting story.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Jennifer. Good luck with your research. You're onto some exciting things.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. You're such a great host. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're a big guest. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And, now that it comes to my mind, she was also saying in the chat room that she's planning to write a book about some of this material. And I was wondering, I'm going to ask on her behalf, even though she didn't ask me to, if it would be okay if she quoted you in some places in her book if she wanted to.
Sure, that'd be fine. One of the really interesting things that's happening with this movie is that we've connected so many dots for people. Connecting the money with the political conspiracy, with the UFOs, with the ETs, with the liberty movement and so forth, that what's happening in a lot of families and in a lot of workplaces is that people are finally feeling safe enough to bring up some of the things that they've been thinking about and researching. And one person in an office place might be familiar with UFOs, another person might be familiar with free energy or the fractional reserve economic scam. But through the coherence of Thrive, conversations are coming into family gatherings and into the workplace that simply weren't taking place before.
Right.
And so people are discovering that each of them has some pieces of the puzzle. And in conversation with one another and through the guidance of Thrive, they're starting to put those pieces together. And it's just, I'm thrilled with how much the movie and the website are helping people to just liberate their willingness to talk about things that they're really interested in. It's been so sort of invalidated and made fun of, a lot of these topics. And they sound, each one of them on their own can sound a little crazy. I've been through a lot of that with my family and friends in the beginning. But once you see how the pieces fit together, the picture that it emerges, the story actually makes a heck of a lot more sense than what we're being told in the corporate media.
Right. And, it really does make a lot of sense, but you have to get, to get bits and pieces straggled out all over the place. It's like looking at a jigsaw puzzle. You don't know what you got until you get the picture put together.
Exactly. That's well said, yeah.
Now, I don't want to let you get out of here until I get a chance for you to tell everybody some of your ideas, because you had some really good, tangible ideas about things that we could be doing, and they can find this stuff at your chat room, your website, not chat room, which I put the link to in the chat room here, which is why I said that. But at any rate, can you give us some ideas real quick about steps that everybody could be taking that could help put things back the way they should be, in other words?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, because that's really actually what I'm by far the most interested in of all. And once people do their research, through our website or a movie or others and go far enough to get motivated, then it's a question of, okay, well, what can I do? And so we've been trained to think that a single person is so helpless against the powers that be, but it's quite the opposite. There's actually very few people who are perpetrating this agenda, and as people find out about it, we outnumber them, by my calculations, by at least 1,000,000 to 1 in this country alone. And as we withdraw our participation from the organizations which are perpetrating this agenda, from the military, from some aspects of the government, certain multinational corporations, and the media that's suppressing a lot of truth, as we withdraw our participation, their house of cards comes falling down, and they'll either go out of business, or they'll have to start basing their business more on integrity if they're going to survive. So there are large-scale strategies, what we call critical mass actions, to end the Federal Reserve and steps like that to end GMO food and the forcing of GMO seeds upon farmers all over the world. But there are also a lot of things that we can do just daily in our own lives, but with the decisions that we make, that don't take a lot of time and don't take a lot of money. And we have in the film and on the website a recommended top 10 actions. And there are things like, first of all, simply get informed and start speaking up with your friends, and then connect with other people to take action. And some of the actions that you can take is, first of all, pull your money out of what Catherine Austin Fitts calls the tapeworm banks, who are wreaking such havoc across the planet and robbing people, and bank locally so that your money circulates in your own community rather than being in London overnight and in a coal-fired power plant the next day. And then if you have enough money to invest responsibly in companies that are not polluting the planet and that are actually bringing in healthy products. And pay attention to where you buy. Where's their funding coming from, and are the products healthy, and are they treating their employees well? Join the movement to audit and end the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve is really kind of at the core of the financial destruction of so many hundreds of millions of lives across this country. And it can be exposed and ended very quickly if enough people wake up. The main tool to do all of that is to keep the Internet fair and open. There are corporations trying to take it over, the government's trying to take it over, the UN is trying to take it over, and we need to keep access to the Internet uncensored and open. And then in terms of what you eat and what's grown, insist on labeling of products if they have GMOs in it, and ultimately create a GMO-free zone in your area where you don't allow these seeds that are robbing farmers. There's hundreds of thousands of farmer suicides due to the fact that they basically bankrupt the farms because they don't get to use their own seeds the next year. Plus, a lot of these GMO products, it's been shown in animal testing, cause infertility or even death in the second and third generation. So it's nasty stuff that we need to get rid of, and we can. Many countries have already. And then while we're bringing integrity to the political system, and ultimately, in my view, transcending it, one of the things that we can do is do everything we can to take corporate money out of campaigns, and so that candidates aren't crippled by a lack of money or indebted to the corporations and the bankers that then end up running politics because they've bribed the politicians. And then, in terms of energy, I encourage everyone to advocate for renewable energy, for wind and solar and that type of thing. But meanwhile, find out about what we call radiant energy or free energy or new energy technology, which is so exciting and can transform the power dynamic on this planet more than anything in recorded history. And it already exists. We just need to get the political will and the mass agreement to stop the suppression and get this out. And then finally, check out our website and look into what we call critical mass action, along the line of what the Occupy movement is doing, but very specifically targeting what we think are the most important initiatives to turn this whole thing around as quickly as possible.
Well, I think in all of that I heard, the biggest key factor that I heard was about the using renewable energy sources. I mean, if you could take the legs out from underneath the power company, you would save yourself tons of money and take tons of money away from the people who are misusing the money for power in the first place.
Exactly. And think of these free energy devices being available, you know, in rural Africa and in the mountain in the Himalayas, and just accessing energy everywhere. Imagine people in dire poverty suddenly having a way to light their homes and run their wells and so forth. And then imagine everyone else not having to pay for running your car, not having to pay to heat your house or to cook your food. We have the capability through what will be relatively inexpensive devices to make a one-time purchase and then meet all of your utility needs for nothing.
This is true. I happen to know for a fact that if you paid a company, it'd cost you $32,000 to install solar panels, but you wouldn't pay an electric company after that. On the other hand, you can go down there for less than $1,000 and buy panels and install them yourself. And it's not a tremendously hard job to do, as I understand it. And most people, they either have a friend that's an electrician or a relative that's an electrician that could probably come help you do it. And that in itself would be a huge thing for you as well as the movement at the same time.
Sure. Yeah, it's sweeping Europe. You know, you go through Germany and a vast number of the houses have solar panels on the roofs, and they have the system set up over there so that any extra energy you have, you can sell to the utilities companies, so they're actually making money from running their house on clean energy.
And then you're also making your air a little bit more breathable, which goodness knows nowadays allergy season is almost year-round when it used to be just during pollen season.
Yeah, it's all unnecessary. But if people learn about these new energy technologies, particularly accessing energy right out of the space around us, we can stand up for that and bring that in, in the next couple of decades.
Yeah, I think we really could if we all worked together on this. And, the one thing I thought I might mention that's a little on the negative side, and I hope you don't mind this, Foster, but I'm really doing it hopefully in the benefit here, is I know a lot of people are going to say that they've looked on the internet and there's been people that wanted to refute Foster and they've got negative things to say. And for people that run into this here stuff, I just want to tell you right now, you need to dig a little further than what you're actually reading at that site, because these are people that would really stand to gain if they did put a stop to it. And what, Foster's really suggesting here is really for the good of everybody involved. It doesn't matter what a person would think of Foster, me, or anybody else. What you really got to ask yourself is the proposals. Are they good proposals or not? After all, that's what's going to count in the end. Yes,
you'll notice if you've been following these type of areas at all that anyone who is bringing the truth out, connecting the dots, they've got a successful invention, they're exposing the economic system or anything like that, there are going to be people all over the internet trying to invalidate their information and assassinate their character and so forth. I know from people who are familiar with intelligence organizations and so forth that people are paid at full time to sit at computer banks and take on false identities and go into these sites and just try to ruin their reputation and intimidate any positive commentary that's going on. So you just have to look through that. I don't want you to believe anything I'm saying. I just want you to check out the information for yourself, and our website allows you to do that to a great extent. We link to a lot of other wonderful sites and books and videos and so forth. Check it out yourself, and if you want to take action, then go to the solutions and the what can I do section of the site, and it'll give you a lot of hints about how to be effective. And I'm going to need to jump off this because I've got another interview starting in a couple of minutes.
That's okay. I was just getting ready to tell you we need to put an end to this here, and I wanted to thank you for coming on my show. I really have enjoyed talking to you, and I'd like to be able to have you back again, and I do plan to do my best to support your work and get the word out.
I really appreciate that. It's been really fun talking with you, and I admire the work that you're doing, so thanks for having me on.
All righty. Well, thanks a lot, Foster, and I hope to have you on again in the future. You be good.
I appreciate that. Take care.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All righty, everybody. Real quick, before we end this show, I just want to remind everybody to please stop back in Saturday. And I'm going to tell you here in just a second My next show is, Sacred Mysteries, Saturday, December 3rd with Jay Wiedner. And he does a lot of the ancient spiritual work and ancient astronaut work combined. And I think you're really going to enjoy this. And also on Monday, which I don't usually have a show on Monday, so I'm letting you guys know in advance that I'm rescheduling for Monday Anthony Sanchez, who I missed recently. And we're going to be talking about his book, UFO Highway. And he's also got a new book out. And we're going to talk about his research work at Dulce Base and some of the other places. Like I want to say Area 51, but I could be wrong about that, so I don't want to have anybody quote me. And I also wanted to mention UPI International at www.upiinternational.ning.com. The link's on the logo on the left side of my page here if y'all want to visit them. And don't forget to pass my URL around. If you like the show, then it's a good chance other people will too. And I'm going to call this one a wrap. And folks, thank you very much for listening. I couldn't have a show without you. And you guys be good and I'll be real. Good night, everybody. All right. Should I say good afternoon?